Welcome to Responsible AI, the podcast for the AI Forum. Here on the podcast, we engage in critical dialogue with legal minds and tech experts on AI's legal and societal impacts. We talk to professionals in cybersecurity, law, and technology, offering deep dives into public policy and best practices. Responsible AI is hosted by Alex Albin, director of the AI Forum, and me, your producer, Rebecca Staffel. You can learn more at our website, theaiforum.org. We're talking today with former Washington State Governor Jay Inslee. As Washington State's three-term governor, he championed climate action, clean energy innovation, equity, and progressive values. Under his leadership, Washington has consistently ranked among the best states for working families and business growth. A fifth-generation Washingtonian, Governor Inslee has served as a leader across local, state, and federal levels for over 30 years. Governor Inslee, welcome to the show, and hello, Alex Albin.
Governor, great to have you here, and we really appreciate your taking some time to chat with us about maybe issues that you've been thinking about for a while, and have some perspective on that you'd like to share with Washingtonians and beyond on the great interweb.
Well, first off, I'm honored you'd have me, but a little shocked that you want somebody who served 7 terms in Congress associated with anything with the word intelligence. I find that a curious guest selection process, but I'll accept it.
Interesting how things are evolving, and technology is playing a part in driving maybe to places that are a little bit scary, a little bit unfamiliar in terms of the quality of our political dialogue. So just very broadly as an opening question, obviously over 3 terms and as governor, 7 terms in Congress, you saw a lot of technologies come and go. And you were asked to regulate those technologies from time to time, whether it was drones or facial recognition. Over your career, did you develop some sort of approach to how you look at a new technology and decide whether it needs to have regulation or whether you should let it go for a while or some mix in between?
Well, I'm not sure that I had a master plan, but if I was going to categorize my approach, it would be alert, be a good listener, and be cautious in a regulatory approach. And I think that was the right approach. I think largely we have followed it because of the intricacies and the unpredictable consequences of regulation with such a fast-growing ecosystem that changes so rapidly. So I guess my approach has been be alert, be a good listener, but think carefully before you do take some regulatory approach in this particular realm of technology. I think it's been relatively the right approach, but at some point you got to take action too. So I know states I saw that our great Senator Cantwell passed an amendment last night that will, as I understand it, allow states to not be shackled. And I trust her judgment quite a bit on these subjects. So that would be my general approach.
Right. Well, I remember also your approach was you always stuck up for the little guy. I don't know if you remember when we were starting webcasting back in the late 1990s, you were in Congress, I was at Real Networks, and the little tech startups were getting killed by the recording industry because they wanted to have a 10 times higher music royalty just for the internet than they paid for the same music. And you sponsored a bill on this that actually made a difference to the industry. Do you remember that?
Well, I did. I remember it quite well. And it was interesting because somehow I became alert to this because I came to know the people who were developing Pandora. And they were going to essentially be put out of business by this approach to just hammer them with these ungodly amounts of fees. And I just saw great promise in that type of service. And it appeared to me like the big guys just had the almost monopolistic hammer and were going to shut down the ability to develop that. So I did bring a bill, and that did provoke, there was enough support for it that both parties sat down and worked out something that allowed Pandora and similar services to grow. And that was probably the most positive thing I've done in this realm. And now they still charge me for Pandora, though. You'd think I'd get like a free subscription out of the deal or something.
You would.
No. So, I did do something else, Alex. I don't even know if you know it, but I authored one of the first bills about allowing digital signatures back in the Clinton administration. So the first bill, I think it was the first bill I got passed, that essentially opened the door to allow digital signatures. That was back in 93, 94. I go back, but my lack of sophistication and technology, I probably shouldn't stray a lot farther than that.
Those were both key developments, though, when you look back and say, if you try to choke something at the outset, like we did in the Sony Betamax case. I was a young lawyer, first year lawyer, and we represented the movie studios that tried to kill the Betamax because we said, oh, it's making copies. That's, illegal. If we had killed that technology, we would have killed a lot of devices that allow people to enjoy content and music and copy it and distribute it. So I think you kind of have to be very careful when you try to ban a technology.
Right. I actually think we should maybe spend a little less of our time trying to rein in artificial intelligence and be more adept at reining in natural stupidity. So that's another one of my working concepts. I find these very challenging issues though, because they are so complex and unpredictable about where new technologies will go. I do tend to stand up intuitively for the little guy, just as a matter of emotional context, because the little guys were mostly where innovation comes from. That I don't know, 90% of innovation comes from somebody who started with $4 in their pocket and a good idea. And so if you want to be pro innovation, you probably normally want to look out for the interests of the little guy to start with, because that's where really the driving engine is, which I'm really concerned about now because of the clamp down on the research and development going on at our universities, some of the efforts to choke off the ability of people to come to America and innovate. The innovation agenda is really threatened by a couple of the actions coming out of the Trump administration that I'm very concerned about sort of long term. Not necessarily through the regulatory approach, but just choking off the capital and human and financial that goes into the innovation economy. And I think we should be very concerned about that because this is the lifeblood of the economy of the United States. This is where we shine. And I'm very concerned about that right now.
And Governor, I mean, you saw this firsthand in Washington State, where we are a state that welcomes people from all over the world to come and to contribute to tech companies and to non-tech companies. And if we didn't have that supply of brilliant people coming in that then spurred other ideas and other companies and other jobs, that turned out to be a very large part of our economy. And you saw this firsthand.
Well, it's very personal in the sense because you think about the innovation that's come out of the state of Washington in the last 3 decades, from Microsoft to pharmaceuticals to advanced retail development to space. Ours are the rockets that are in charge of all the satellites that have left the solar system. That comes out of our company in Redmond. And if you go into the back rooms of those companies, at least 25 to 30% of the people doing that research were born outside of the United States. But now they're bringing their talents here and developing these enormously successful companies that then help everybody, people in the construction industry, people in the grocery business. Even if you're not in the tech business, they're so productive in the whole economy to get people to work. And those people are such productive members of our economy, not criminals. It really frosts me when Trump calls these people criminals when they're geniuses back there inventing the future back in the labs,
Right.
on the shores of Lake Union. The depiction of them when they've fostered so much positivity and growth in our society is just nuts.
It's a shockingly false depiction. And it now is threatening to extend to the universities and foreign students who come here, because even if those students don't stay in the US directly, they gain a perspective on the world and what our society is like that they bring back to their country, which makes the world a smaller place. And I have to think makes the world a better place.
Well, if they qualify, that's great. But if they go home, they leave a lot of their technological brilliance they've developed here with the IP that stays with the universities and then gets spun off. So we're net benefit in so many different ways from that group. My daughter-in-law actually is in the group that helps commercialize some of the research at the University of Washington. And to see what's coming out of that place is stunning. I remember I met these two guys. We started this clean tech test bed facility at the University of Washington several years ago. They're 20 years old, and they developed a new way to increase the efficiency of silicon solar cells by sort of tuning the frequency of light. And they had this new idea, and I met them when they were doing their first sort of testing. Well, they spun off now to a commercial entity, and we want to keep that kind of innovation going.
Right. We're speaking with a former member of Congress and a three-term Washington governor, Jay Inslee. Jay, you were the author of a book in 2007 called Apollo's Fire: Igniting America's Clean Energy Economy. At the time, that was a really bold and almost novel proposal. You wanted to sort of create an Apollo space mission style effort to energize the clean energy economy. And a lot of those ideas caught on. It's been almost 20 years since that book came out. What's your assessment? Did you have more successes than failures, or do you think it's still a work in progress?
I would say it was not a smashing success as a bestseller, but it has been a smashing success as a vision statement, because that vision is coming to pass. Look, the thing I wrote about in 2007, which is predicting that solar prices would come down so low that they're cheaper than coal, and wind would do the same, and advanced batteries are helping achieve both those things. That's a present case situation. It's not 20 years from now, it's today. 90% of the places in America, solar and wind is cheaper than coal-based energy right now. That's why people aren't building coal plants, in part. So sort of that vision statement is coming to pass because principally of the incredible genius of people in private enterprise and some universities. And we've had some policies, including the Inflation Reduction Act and the Infrastructure Act, which were so important in galvanizing construction of these new energy plants, which are springing up all over the country with such rapidity, including in our state. We've had such success in clean energy in our state. We have two of the most advanced silicon anode battery companies in the whole world in Moses Lake. We have chemical engineers from Stanford developing a sustainable jet fuel out of carbon dioxide and water. We have the first marine advanced battery companies in Bellingham. We're just rocking it with these new companies that are paving the way to a clean energy future. It's been very successful as a vision statement, and I'm just, I want to cry when I see what's happening in the U.S. Senate.
Taking away.
Passed a bill that basically tried to kneecap the fastest growing part of our economy, which is clean energy. And it's just criminal out of one of Donald Trump's phobia. And it is a phobia. There's no other way to describe why you would want to deny Americans cleaner, cheaper energy. Let me emphasize, cheaper energy. Solar power is cheaper than coal-based, and Trump wants to destroy the industry. We did take a little bit of the sting out with an amendment which would get rid of an excise tax that the Republicans wanted to put on solar and wind, which was really absurd. That came out of the bill, but this is still, going backwards 100 miles an hour. It's very disturbing to me. So we had 24 House members send a letter saying, hey, Mr. President, Mr. Majority Leader, don't kill these jobs. We're creating jobs in our districts, right? That's what we're hired to do. And we're getting cheaper energy. But now they're going to vote for the bill and just follow their cult leader. And that's the definition of a cult, where you surrender your own intellectual firepower and integrity to the cult leader. And that's what these guys are doing. Dan Newhouse is doing this. He holds Miles' seat in Congress. And it's just a damn shame because Dan knows better. He knows this is idiocy to lose these clean energy industries. But he's going to vote for it anyway, I presume. Now, if I'm wrong on that, that'll be great. But and I'll buy him a veggie burger or something, whatever he wants.
Governor, this theme of clean energy and all the work that you did on this relates, of course, to the climate change, which was the centerpiece of your presidential campaign in 2020. And it was very bold to focus on one clear issue, in the presidential campaign. And I just wonder, as you reflect on that effort, whether you think that was the right approach and what you accomplished by emphasizing this to a national audience for a year.
Well, listen, when you don't have a personality, you have to have an issue. So I had an issue, and it wasn't just an issue. It's not just one of the issues. It's the issue that we will be judged on 100 years from now. If anybody looks back at our time in public life, the number one thing they'll ask is, did they try to prevent a catastrophe that is worldwide, which is now hitting us? It's hitting us in Washington state. We've lost 40% of the glacial ice on Mount Rainier. We have forest fires going crazy. The water is so hot in Puget Sound, the kelp are dying. Our salmon can't get up the rivers. Our kids are having an epidemic of asthma. They can't go out sometimes because of forest fire smoke. This is hitting us right now. So I really do believe in the scope of history. That's what we will be judged on. Did we stand up for the future to have some healthy future? And I'm glad America is developing the technologies where we're able to do that. And so I did run a presidential campaign principally on that message, and it was very successful. Didn't happen to get in the White House. I only missed it by about 99%. But but about 95% of my ideas ended up in the White House. President Biden, to his credit, raised his ambitions during the campaign, which largely matched mine, and passed this incredible bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, and for the infrastructure bill, which are hiring thousands of people around the country, offering people cheaper electricity. It's been a smashing success. And that was, basically my plan. And President Biden has said as much. So I would have to consider it a real success in that regard. Plus, I really enjoyed the experience. It was wonderful meeting people around the country who cared about democracy.
Do you have any anecdotes of just things that surprised you about meeting Americans all across the country?
Well, I think if everybody should run for president, and the reason is it just warms the cockles of your heart that people care so much about democracy and their country. And so when you run for president for about a year or year and a half, every day the people you meet really care about the country. That's why you meet them. They're politically active, and they really have a sincere belief to try to help their communities. So it's very inspiring. Obviously, I'm not talking about the candidates. I'm talking about the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers who, for one reason or another, believe in a better future for America. So it's a very optimistic process when you meet Americans who care so much to be active in politics and care who's going to be. And boy, do they. In Iowa and New Hampshire, you remember in New Hampshire, I remember meeting a woman, and she told a story about, Gore asked me to support him, and she said, "Well, I don't know. I've only met him twice, so I gotta." And so people are very demanding of their candidates in especially these primary states. So anyway, it was a good thing. I think the biggest moment, and this is not a criticism, but it is a comment. When we were on a debate, can't remember if it was Miami or Detroit, and there was one issue, one question about climate change, just at the tail end of the debate. That's all we get. It's the thing that life depends on, but it gets maybe one question out of a 2-hour debate. And then Vice President Biden asked how he was going to solve this problem of getting off coal or something. And he said something like, "Yeah, I don't know, we'll work on it." And I was down at the far end of the podium, and it wasn't my turn. And usually I really follow the rules. I'm a stickler on following the rules. I don't interrupt people. It wasn't my time to talk. But I was so disappointed by that answer. I just blurted out, I said, "Work on it? Work on it? Hell, the planet's burning down. What do you mean we're going to work on it?" I just sort of an emotional reaction to his less than ambitious proposal in that answer. And to his credit, he raised his bar and he totally revamped his policy, and he ended up adopting a fantastic energy policy that's been very, very successful. So I violated the rules, but maybe raised the profile of the issue.
People agree that you inspired many, many people, especially young people, in your quest in 2020. It is disappointing that some issues don't seem to be so-called voting issues. Of course, as a privacy advocate, I run into this as well. Everyone wants privacy. Everyone thinks protect my data, stop stealing, my personal secrets. But they don't seem to vote on it. It doesn't seem to cut through the political filter, and I'm always puzzled by that.
Well, first off, this is something we need to work on. We do need to increase the number of people who make clean energy and climate change a priority in their voting decisions, a higher priority. It needs to be a higher priority for us to actually succeed ultimately. And that takes further communication, and I'm working on that. I work with a group called Climate Power. I'm sort of a national spokesperson for them, and do as much work as I can on cable and podcasts and wherever they can send me to speak. I'm working with another group that has some ideas about communication as well. Part of it is a lack of communication. People don't hear about it. They just don't hear about it. Hear about baseball scores every day, but you don't even hear about this issue unless you read the New York Times and listen to NPR and the Album podcast. So it has a very narrow band of information. So we just had this heat dome across the entire United States. And, how many times did people really talk about what the source of that heat dome? Very, very, very infrequently. During the California fires, the fossil fuel industry was able to dominate the coverage, saying it was because there was a gay, fire marshal, instead of the fact that the California is an explosive piece of dynamite right now because it's so dry because of climate change. And they dominated that discussion because of a lack of communication. So we need to up our frequency, duration, and intelligence about how we talk to people about this, to talk to them about where they live. This is about love. This is about protecting what you love. It's also about economic benefit, that you will get cheaper electricity. And that's a message that we have not to date delivered with the frequency we need to. The Republicans voted for more expensive electricity. And Trump, here's a guy who said he wanted to reduce inflation. First thing he does is shove expensive electricity down our throats. So we've got some more work to do on the communication front. But for those who are frustrated by this, and I've been at this for 30 years, so I'm the champion in frustration, you got to understand this is a difficult issue because climate change is slow, carbon dioxide is invisible, and to solve it, we have to adopt some new technologies. So change is difficult, and this is one of the most difficult things to work on. So we shouldn't be surprised that this is a difficult issue.
Right.
We should also note the incredible progress we've made. It's been stunning. The fact that you can now get electricity cheaper than fossil fuel with zero, well, it's not zero, you still got to make solar cells and they have a supply chain, but it's, in their operation, essentially zero. This is an incredible achievement. This is like a gift from the gods. If you believe in the afterlife and divinity, this has been a gift of human intellect that we can actually solve this problem. We're driving EVs all over the place. I got a little Bolt outside that, we drive all over the state of Washington. Fine, works great, safe. This is a gift. And, you can have almost a fully electrified home right now with technologies that are off the shelf, that are cheaper than fossil fuel, healthier, and fun to drive. And that can be a heat pump to heat and cool your home, because now we need cooling in Seattle. We didn't used to. And it can be solar on your rooftop or in a commercial or buying green power from your grid. Look, we're in a good spot. All we got to do is use what we have. And that's the thing that we got to turn the ship around.
Right. I'm curious about your perspective. A lot of the tech companies have made announcements that they want to use more nuclear power to fuel the big data centers and the big server farms that are helping to propel AI and other technologies. What's your perspective on nuclear and that mix of solutions?
Well, I don't think we should shut the door to consideration of any zero carbon or low carbon emitting. Nothing zero, of course. So I don't think you should just categorically say no in all situations. However, when it comes to existing levels of fission-based energy, with the existing designs that we have, it is so expensive, and we have not solved the waste disposal problem. So in the real term, to allow it to become viable commercially, it has to come down in cost. It's just too expensive relative to solar and wind. It just costs more. You've got a less costly, certainly less controversial, and with no waste stream of alternatives that are available in most situations, which is solar and wind and advanced batteries and efficiency as well, right? So you can produce energy from efficiency as well. So to me, in most cases, it shouldn't be the first place you look. Now, we do have fusion coming on, which is under development, and the very first fusion plant may be under construction as early as maybe in the next year in Malaga, Washington, with the Helion Company.
That is very exciting.
So it's hugely exciting. This could be the savior of humanity if this works, and it's a real term. It's raised, I don't know, maybe $1 billion of capital to move forward. So this is a reasonable chance of success, and that would be incredible. So I guess my answer is there's other places to look first for solving this energy problem.
Fusion, I agree, is something that just has always held this tremendous potential. When I was an undergraduate at Stanford, I remember taking a class called Energy from Nature to Man. And they had a Nobel Prize winning physicist lecturer. And he said, fusion is 50 years away. It's 50 years.
Right.
And I went back to Stanford for an alumni event a few years ago, and it was about energy. And the professor said, fusion is 50 years away.
It's always 50 years away. That's what they say.
But the reality is there have been advances at ITER, the facility in Lawrence Livermore, where they actually demonstrated a net energy gain last year from a fusion event. And that if we can do that, then it's an engineering problem. I'm not saying it's an easy engineering, but it's promising.
They've had the first public meeting in Malaga about a month ago, and the community was very accepting of the fusion plants, 50 megawatt plant proposed in Malaga. And I talked to somebody about 2 weeks ago who said that they have a realistic chance of beginning construction within a year of that plant, which would be incredible to do it this rapidly, right? Because, a fission plant takes 10 years even to site. So the advantages of it would be profound. There are actually 4 companies in Western Washington working on fusion. Helion is the closest to application, but there are multiple approaches to fusion. It's not just the type of intensive laser bombardment like they used at Lawrence Livermore. There are a variety of approaches of containment to contain this energy. So this would be a dream come true. But the point is, though, you don't have to wait for it. We've got it today, right? I mean, we got not infinite, but so much land and so much sunshine. Here's the biggest challenge, though, and that's our grid system. The biggest challenge in clean energy today is our antiquated grid system and our inability to really permit and finance new transmission lines and enhanced transmission lines. And we do have to crack that nut. We have a terrible situation in Washington where we have all this solar and wind capacity, but the Bonneville Power Administration is, taking 15 years to design and permit additional grid, and that's just got to change. So I think that one of the next big policy things we got to get done and start in the next Congress is to get a system. But it's hard because Trump wanted to fire a fifth of all the people who work at the Bonneville Power Administration. Well, who the hell is going to build the transmission lines then?
Right. It's hard to criticize a policy when there is no policy.
Right. Or there's nobody there to do the work.
There's no driving direction other than whimsical, gestural politics. And that to me is frustrating.
The most frustrating thing to me about the clean energy discussion is that people want to make decisions based on ideology rather than just dollars and cents and common sense. And clean energy has become politicized for no reason at all. It's not politicized in almost any other country in the whole world except the United States. And for reasons that defy my understanding, people say, look, I got a little box. It's a black box, and it'll give you energy that's cheaper than coal with no pollution. Is it okay with you that we do the black box? What Donald Trump would say, no, not if it's solar or wind energy, because that really makes me angry. Can't use that. Put that box away. It scares me. I mean, the only thing I can think of, he was scared by a wind turbine when he was a kid. He saw a windmill in the Netherlands and it scared him, and now he says they cause cancer. That's the only thing that I can figure out.
We live in really strange political and societal times, which I don't think you or I could ever have predicted. We're talking with Governor Jay Inslee, governor of the state of Washington for 3 terms. So just to shift topics a little bit from energy, you first won elective office when you won your congressional race in an eastern Washington district in the 1990s. That seems to be very old-fashioned style of politics. And now we seem to have the political discussion really driven by social media, by digital data, by TikTok. When you look at that type of change, has that been positive for politics? Or is it scary that, so many strange ideas can come to dominate the political debate?
Well, if it's a yes or no, good or bad assessment of technology. I hate to say bad because everybody's a fan of the internet and social media would jump on my throat and I'd be banned from the
So
internet
we
or
won't
something.
say that.
However, having said that, if you just look at my experience, so when I ran for Congress in 1992, I got a friend of mine who had a video camera and I made my own little commercials and I raised enough money to put them on local television and I went out in the street corner, I held my sign and I doorbelled 24,000 homes. And I got up at 5:30 in the morning and went out and held my sign and said, Jay Inslee, and I'd wave to people on the way to work. And then they'd see my little commercial just talking about something I thought was important that night when they're watching, Wheel of Fortune or something. So that's how I campaign. And now now people are just receiving one side or the other's messages exclusively, meaning they're only receiving mine or they're only receiving my opponents, and that's all they receive. And in that situation, in today's media world, I would not have had access to, frankly, the voters I needed to win as I did in 1992, because I have no way to get to them because they have a hose that they're drinking out of and it's not attached to my faucet. So I actually think that on a net basis, the new system of communication, as much as we had high hopes for it, that it was going to democratize information and everybody would be free and you wouldn't be controlled by a corporate conglomerate. In the real world, it has led to people being much more exposed to blatantly false information and then accepting it. And it has actually reduced the ability of people to reach each other, to be exposed to each other. So when I was running a very Republican red district, independents and Republicans were exposed to my message. Didn't mean they bought it all, but at least they were exposed to it because they'd see it on Wheel of Fortune. They'd see me standing on the street corners. Now they're not exposed to me, and my team isn't exposed to them. So that's been really unhealthy. It has led to a huge polarization of the country. And most importantly, it has led to people believing falsehoods that is beyond imagination. And it's really hard to reach consensus when half the country believes the moon landing was fake and COVID was invented by Dr. Fauci and the vaccine will kill you. And so it's hard for me to argue that it's that we're in a better position.
I had an editorial in the Seattle Times about disinformation, and the editor asked me to, well, come up with a solution. You don't come up with a solution in your 800-word editorial.
Right.
I said, I need 8,000 words to come up with a solution.
I don't know. I certainly don't have, quote, a solution to the problem, except to be as vigorous in the social networks as humanly possible. And I think that at least my team can be more adept at that. But, right now the social media is dominated by the right and the conservative voices. If you look at the podcasts, there's probably 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 people who sort of lean towards the right side of the equation of the podcast popularity. That's disturbing. So my side of the debate is really not represented. And that has to change on how we concentrate our minds and our finances as well. That's one of the things I'm talking to people about in the climate space to try to do a lot better job.
It's something that we need to work on, I think, at a very early educational level, because that's when people still have open minds. They are still looking for information. Once you reach old people like me, we've already made up our minds. We have lots of opinions, but how much are we really learning about the world and about an issue like climate change or education? It strikes me that this is a very profound challenge for our politics, because the masters of disinformation are winning right now because they're just being smart, to use that word, about how to use the media that is prevailing of the moment. And I just wonder, I don't know if you have an answer for this at all, but AI now is starting to dominate technology, and it strikes me that the candidates who use AI are going to be very successful. Have you thought about the use of AI in any of the political outreach or communications that you do?
So far, there's been more successful lying using old technologies than necessarily needing new ones, right? So 38% of the people believe that January 6th was just a tea party or something, and it was a Democratic inside job. Like 38% of America believes that. And they didn't need artificial intelligence
To
to
get there.
create that misinformation ecosystem. So I guess I'm more concerned about the innate willingness of people just to lie without thinking twice about it. And this is a difficult thing for me because, I usually don't like to argue that Democrats are more virtuous than Republicans, and, because we're all humans and we all are mortal and we all have glitches. But I swear on everything that's holy that Donald Trump, in one administration, has told more lies in a week than all the Democratic presidents in the history of the United States. Really? And has no ethical or internal restraint on that. And if you have no restraint on bold-faced lying, and half of your team in the discussion has that ethical standard, that's a problem. I think the old-fashioned lack of integrity is actually more dangerous than artificial intelligence.
It's a failure in part of the journalistic environment that we enjoy today, where there used to be a lot of emphasis on fact checking and looking at what the core truth is about an issue. I know when I worked at CBS News, that was our mission, tell the facts of what happened today and be neutral and be objective. And that approach is almost out the window right now. Which
No, the professional journalism, that's why the demise of professional journalism is so catastrophic to democracy. You can't overstate it. Together with the fact that people just aren't reading it, even if you do have professional journalism, people aren't reading it or getting it. So it's a twofer. And again, this comes back to this issue of technology. It's largely because of the internet. That's largely the reason this phenomenon has happened. So I wish I had a solution to it, except to work harder and talk louder in more places.
Well, Governor Inslee, we're very happy that you're engaged in these issues that you care about and making progress. And do you think you have gained something from being out of office now for about a year? I mean, have you gained some perspective on these issues, or how to do your job?
Well, I've been out about 5 months
5 months, okay.
so I know it seems longer to you because you miss me so much
We did.
in public office. Let's see what perspective. Mostly, the perspective I've gained is a newfound ability to continence and survive frustration. Because I actually, so many people have fear and anxiety and frustration as what's happened to our nation in the last 5 months, and I share that. But I whine about it because I actually think it's worse for those who have left public office since that time, because you feel kind of like more responsibility.
Hmm.
I kind of have a feeling that I kind of feel more responsibility for that than most people because I was in a position to do something about it. So I've gained an increasing discipline not to be frustrated and going crazy, and trying to realize that the sun will come up at some point. I mean, I was talking to somebody, one of my staffer, who's just so down in the dumps what happened on the energy perspective of the reconciliation bill. And all I can tell him is, look, the sun's going to come up again. It's going to be 3 years, and it's going to be a long 3 years, but it is going to come up again, and we'll be back. And this has been a delay of progress, and it's a very unfortunate delay, but we will have another opportunity to make progress. The circus is going to come around. The merry-go-round is going to come around again. So we're not out of business, and that's what I've gained, the ability to try to buck people up, even though I'm going crazy.
Governor, maybe that is the tonic, to have a thoughtful discussion like we're having today, to have hope for the future, to recognize that I think the vast majority of people actually want to have common sense solutions in energy, in immigration, and these other issues, and that we have to better understand how we got into this dysfunctional moment, because then we'll get out of it and emerge maybe even stronger and more purposeful.
Well, by the way, we don't have to wait 3 years. We got elections in November 2026, and anybody who cares about this country, I hope, is thinking today where they're going to get involved in races for the U.S. House of Representatives, because I think there is every reason to believe that the House can flip, and when that happens, we'll be able to restrain a lot of the damage that's being done. And that's very, very important. So I hope people are thinking about how they're going to plug into democracy. And they don't have to wait till November 26th. You can start thinking right now. So I really hope people will be less frustrated and more active. We need it.
I want to thank Governor Jay Inslee for sharing his perspective with us on the Responsible AI podcast, and thank him for not only for his time today, but for his public service for so many years in Congress and as our 3-term governor in the state of Washington. And we will look forward to perhaps having you on again when we're in a better moment in time. Let's put it that way.
It's gonna get better. It has to.
All right.
No other choice.
Less frustration, more action.
There you go.
That's where we're going to take it. Thank you so much, Governor Jay Inslee, for joining us on the Responsible AI podcast from the AI Forum. You can subscribe to the Responsible AI podcast on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, or wherever you like to listen. You can see what we've been reading about the legal and ethical implications of AI on our website, theaiforum.org.